Something's going on. Weather's going crazy. People are crazy too. Something's going on. What we gonna do? Fears come out of hiding. Anger's just behind. People with guns everywhere. The president's lost his mind. Time to trust. Time to know. Something's going on. It's time to grow. Time to trust. Time to know. Something's going on. It's time to grow.
Hello, my name is Darryl Robert Schoon. And in 2005, my friend from law school, Marshall Thurber, formed a group called the Positive Deviant Network. Marshall had a theory that in times of great, intense change, the people who had the answers to what was going to happen were positive deviants, those at the edges of society, not at the center. And so he asked me to join. I had met Marshall 1966 in San Francisco at Hastings College of the Law. And in the first year, Marshall wanted me to write an article that he was going to put in the law school newspaper. And I was pretty much disaffected even then because I grew up in the 60s and I didn't want to write the article, but Marshall persisted, being an Aries. So I finally wrote an article and he put it on the front page of the January edition of the Hastings Law School newspaper. The article was called Church Liable for Acts of God. Now, for the lawyers among you, you know this is religious heresy, that no one is liable for an act of God, let alone the church. And when the dean saw the article, he threatened to expel Marshall from law school and shut down student government if the newspaper was sent out for distribution. It wasn't. Anyway, I dropped out of law school. It wasn't my métier. And this was the 60s in San Francisco anyway. And the next year I was living on Haight Street, running the food concessions at the Avalon Ballroom, venue of the Grateful Dead, Country Joe and the Fish, Quicksilver Messenger Service, Janis Joplin. 3 years later, when Marshall was graduating from law school, I was in San Francisco County Jail for selling acid. 10 years later, Marshall was on the front cover of New Age magazine for being a New Age businessman. He was a multimillionaire, living next to Dianne Feinstein, and had a Rolls Royce. I, in 1979, received presidential invitations to the Washington, D.C. reception for Deng Xiaoping, the vice premier of China. I was on Dianne Feinstein's China committee. And the year before, in 1978, I had met with the board of directors of McDonnell Douglas to discuss a airplane offset deal, possible airplane offset deal, aircraft deal with the People's Republic of China. And 2 years later, I accompanied Dianne Feinstein to Shanghai, where I gave a talk before the heads of the Chinese trade organizations in Shanghai and the mayor. And I suggested ways of where I thought the trade flows between the United States and China could be increased. I'm not saying my talk was seminal, but it was sufficient that the next day, Dianne came and addressed and told me specifically that she had heard how impactful it was on the audience. Anyway, in 2005, Marshall formed this Positive Deviant Network, and he asked Martha and I, my wife, to join. There were 70 of us. We met 4 times a year, and the dues were $5,000 a year, and we would meet and discuss certain issues collectively. Marshall thought his question was, what would happen if positive deviants were brought together in a network? Well, this experience had a profound effect on my life. In 2007, I delivered a talk before the PDN. It was a 148-page paper, 148-page paper. And in that paper, I predicted the United States was about to go and experience a severe economic crisis involving the collapse of currencies and the collapse of capital financial markets. The next year, in September 2008, the crisis began. Today, in 2026, the crisis is now entering its final stage. and it's about to get really dicey. When I began writing my articles in 2007, gold was $625 an ounce. I think today it's around 43, 4,400. It's been as high as 5,300, 5,400, I'm not sure. Silver is up in the 60s or 70s and having gone as high as almost 120 last February. And let me assure you, I believe gold and silver are going to go a lot higher because the measure should not be the price of gold and silver. What they're really against is the declining value of the US dollar. And that was set in motion 2007, set in motion in 1971, but now it's coming to a head. Things are going to get really dicey. And that's the purpose of my returning to videos to explain really what I think is going on. I pretty much said my piece 10, 15 years ago, and now it's entered the final stage, and a stage that I would call the Great Rearrangement. Something is going to happen that we've never experienced before, except perhaps in a way during the Great Depression and the World War II, which happened in the 1930s and 1940s. We're about to go through a period that is, I believe, that is that extreme. Now, what I suggest before I do my next video is that what I'm going to say and predict is going to not be easy for people to believe. When I predicted the collapse of capital markets in 2007, it wasn't well received in the Positive Deviant Network. I mean, dues were $5,000 a year. There was a lot of wealthy people in that audience. And I basically got up and presented this very involved paper saying that we're going to have a severe economic crisis. And where their money was basically going to go to zip and get gold and silver. One of the people there who didn't believe it, the next month started buying $10,000 gold worth a month. Now, 4 years ago, I wrote a book which was like the one Time of the Vulture that I wrote in 2007, which predicted the economic collapse. This book is called Docking at the Mothership. All right. And it's very much unlike the Time of the Vulture in the sense that it explains the context of what I believe is now about to happen. And what I suggest before I do any more of these videos, that you go to my website, www.drschoon.com, and read my article, which is under current commentary, Bitcoin, another card in a house of cards. And also on the front page of DR Schoon, my website, is a posting of a video I did probably 11 years ago on politics. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is not because I want you to believe what I'm going to say, because you probably won't. Everybody has an idea now about Bitcoin, and if you don't have an idea about ideas about Bitcoin, you certainly have an idea about politics. And what I want you to read the article and watch the video is to understand and see my different point of view. I have a point of view about Bitcoin that is not common, and my take on politics is also not common. And my take on what is about to happen to us collectively as humanity is also not common. My book, Docking at the Mothership, which I wrote and published in 2022, you might want to go to Amazon and read the review by Ken Gard. I think it's the #1 review. Very few people bought the book. I didn't publish it, haven't posted it much, and rarely talked about it. I just wanted it out there because I didn't think the time was right. When I gave my talk in 2007, I published that as Time of the Vulture, How to Survive the Crisis and Profit in the Process. That book, we put it on a website, on a site, survivethecrisis.com. The site was visited by 10,000 people in the first 2 months from 125 countries. And I sold the book, had basically a copy of with a money-back guarantee of $100 a piece. And the sales continued until the collapse that I predicted happened in 2008. When the collapse happened, sales basically stopped. But you can still buy the book, Time of the Vulture. And I suggest for you who do have economic perspective, read the book. Everything I predicted in there is pretty much true. This new book, Docking to the Mothership, talks about what I believe is going to happen next. What I would call the coming rearrangement. And just as much as my initial audience for the Time of the Vulture did not want to believe in 2007 that we were about to have a catastrophic financial crisis. In 2026, most of you watching this, for all your own reasons that I understand, do not want to believe that what is in front of us is as draconian and extreme as I believe it is going to be. The review that Ken Gard wrote, it's on Amazon, for Docking to the Mothership, is interesting because he was in that original audience in 2007 when I presented my 148-page paper, Time of the Vulture. And Ken says in his review of my book, Docking to the Mothership, he didn't believe what I said in 2007. But then events started unfolding, and he read my book, and he reread it. Let me assure you, Ken Gard now believes what I am writing. In fact, when he read my book, Docking to the Mothership, and reviewed it, he suggested that you do not read it from the beginning, because otherwise you're going to think the author is crazy. And he assures you, in his opinion, I'm not crazy, and I know what I'm talking about. And for that reason, I do suggest that you go to my website, read what I've written about Bitcoin, watch the video I have on politics, but it'll help you, and go to my About page with my bio, which gives you my background to such a degree that you'll understand why my perspective about what is about to happen is not the one that you have. Now, I want to say that nothing is written in stone, at least not granite. And that what I am predicting and what I firmly believe that is going to happen, it may not happen. Because humanity has free will. But I think that everybody who is somewhat cognizant of what is going on in the world and the direction it's headed for believes that unless something really radical changes, we may be headed for a bigger, for that cataclysmic resolution that I'm now predicting. But we do have free will, and it can change. But given humanity's present state of mind, and given our present actions, I don't think there's much chance of it. The real question you should be asking yourselves is, are you going to use your free will to change what may or may not be in your future? And that's why I wrote Docking to the Mothership. And that's why I'm returning back to social media to explain my point of view, because I think these times are going to be a game changer.
Time to trust, time to know. Something's going on. It's time to grow. Time to trust, time to know. Something's going on. It's time to grow. Love is still here waiting for us to find our heart. Instead of thinking AI can replace the holy art of trusting in the future and knowing what to do, of trusting again in life and love, and knowing I am you. Time to trust, time to know. Something's going on. It's time to grow. Time to trust, time to know. Something's going on. It's time to grow.